Mayor, we live.
Great, thank you. So today is September 21st, 2022. The time is 5:08 p.m. and I'm calling to order the Baldwin Park City Council special meeting. Chief, City Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Emanuel Estrada,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Daniel Damian,
Here.
Councilmember Alejandra Avila, Councilmember Monica Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Paul Hernandez, Councilmember Paul Hernandez. He's not present. We don't know. Do we know if he's?
I don't.
No? Okay.
I need a few minutes.
Okay, great. That's it, Mayor.
Great, thank you for that. So at this moment, I will open up public communications. Is there anybody looking to speak? No worries, go ahead.
Greg Tuttle, business owner. I noticed on your special meeting tonight that Chief Lopez is going to talk about the safety over at the homeless stuff and everything. Maybe some of the questions he can answer for me and the people is, has this task force been assembled yet? The other, how many officers involved? What is the training that he's going to do with these officers? Because it's obvious that the officers that are going out on calls now are untrained and do not know the proper procedure. We need to make sure that these officers are trained. We need to make sure that the response time is prompt. And I can say that one time that when I had a text messaging with the city manager and the mayor, we did get a really immediate response on the guy that was setting fire with his campsite and everything else and threatening business owners around there. And that was a very prompt deal. But then we let one guy go. He destroyed a bus center. By the time he was done the next morning, it had all been spray painted and just total clustered. So we need to make sure that these people don't get a chance to destroy our city property that we pay all these taxes for. So let's make sure that these things are done in a prompt manner and that the chief knows how to disperse this properly and the officers are trained. And I highly suggest that they get portable fingerprinting that they do in Santa Ana and Orange County area so that they know who they're talking to, because 99% of these people have no ID on them. But maybe sometimes you might catch a felon. You might catch somebody that's out on a warrant. So we need to know if these people are convicted felons and they're out running around and they should be in jail. So these portable fingerprinting works. My dad was an Orange County sheriff, and I know all about how they handled the homeless down there. And a lot of it was with fingerprinting so they could ID the people and know that these people are either violent or they have a criminal history, and we need to deal with them. So we need to do these kind of things when we get done. And all this stuff of asking, well, when I have a crime and I'm reporting it and telling the chief, which he never gets back with anybody, but well, who was the officer? Who was this? Well, you have video camera on the officers 24/7. Why don't you look it up? You know the time and date, but nobody does that. And does anybody contact us afterwards? Absolutely not. Thank you very much.
John Rios, resident. I noticed on the police department, I did confront one homeless that was laying down and sleeping the whole day, to tell you the truth, because I went in the morning and then later that afternoon. I did call it in, but somebody else called in prior to me. And one of the things I noticed that the officers, you're going to get into a homeless person, you should put some gloves and a mask for sure. Because you don't know what they're carrying or anything, where they've been or anything. But you got to teach your officers to put some rubber gloves. It's not hard to put on, and your mask. You know, and one of the things that the officer did do is to wake the person up, which was a female, and, you know, she just got up and just left. You know, the officer didn't question her or anything. And that's something that, like Mr. Tuttle said, you know, we have to really know what's out there. It is dangerous with the homeless, you know, but we have to be a little more aggressive, to tell you the truth. I've seen too many incidents, like in Barnes Park. I see a lot of incidents over there. I had talked to many about it, you know, to get and clear up the bushes behind the city yard right there. We had to get in contact with Caltrans, which is part of Caltrans right there. But I even talked to you, Mr. Lopez, Chief Lopez, and told him about that, you know. But since somebody has to get involved with Caltrans and follow up on it, because it's like a jungle again over there. And a lot of the homeless, they go in there, they're not even homeless, they're dealing with drugs. They're dealing with different other things, you know, which I don't want to mention it because there's ladies right here. But we have to be a little more aggressive. We cannot hold back no more. The homeless, they're getting very comfortable in the city unless we start pushing them back. We have to send them back to LA. Yeah. Sorry to say, but LA is a total mess. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else? If not, I will close public communication and we will go ahead with our open session. And the first session is for the food insecurity application opportunity. So I am going to go ahead and hand this over to
Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and take lead on this project. Today we have Brielle Acevedo from San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust Manager, as well as Nicholas Rye, San Gabriel Valley Council of Government Sustainability Manager, and myself that will give the presentation. Nicholas, would you like to start, please?
Sure, thank you so much. And good evening, council members. My name is Nicholas, and I'm the San Gabriel Valley Council of Government Sustainability Manager. I've actually been with the COG for about 3 months, but I'm helping oversee our regional programs and issues related to energy, water, waste, coyote education, wildfires, and broadband. Like was mentioned, I'm here to co-present about the food insecurity application slideshow that we have here for tonight's meeting. I'll be going over the first 9 slides, and then Manny also will go and wrap us up with the last 4. So thank you again for giving us this opportunity to present. And with that, let's get started. First slide, please. Sorry, is the slideshow up? I actually realized I don't see it here.
I'm sorry, we did not receive any PowerPoint for the slides.
Oh,
Let's see here. Let's see if Lulu could forward it to Mark.
we had that slideshow. We can that
Yeah,
to you as needed.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
Sorry, has the slideshow been sent already, or is that still uploading?
If you could share your screen, Nicholas, that would be best.
Okay, all right, give me 1 second. All right.
Let's see. Mark, are you going to put it up on the screen?
No, Nicholas is going to share his screen.
All right.
Okay. All right. Give me 1 second. Apologies for that. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second to just prepare this. All right. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we could.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So this was the first slide that I just went over. Like I introduced myself, and Manny is also going to help out with the presentation. Brielle's also in the background too if there's any other questions. So I guess with that, let's begin. So for some background about this food insecurity funding opportunity, the reason the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments decided to develop this application is twofold. First, food demand from our region's homelessness programs continues to grow, as well as the rising costs of food as an operating expense. Secondly, as you may be aware, local jurisdictions and food generating entities, which we also call FROs for short, these are your local grocery stores and restaurants, they have to comply with food recovery requirements outlined in the state's SB 1383 Climate Pollutant Reduction Bill. This bill aims to reduce organic waste disposal by 75% and to increase the rescue of 20% of currently disposed food by 2025. And I'll keep going on. And given both of these trends, the SGV COG has allocated $250,000 to support food insecurity efforts and to really expand our food recovery capacity in the region. We think this is a really unique opportunity to coordinate efforts of both food recovery compliance with the unmet food demand for our homeless programs. And when you think about it, this helps address both food insecurity in our homelessness community and also helps us with climate change mitigation efforts. In terms of the actual grant itself, the maximum amount an applicant can receive is up to $50,000. As you can see here, this grant is due, or this grant will be due, actually need to be used by June 15th. And for eligible applicants, it's pretty flexible, but it's open to local jurisdictions, nonprofit organizations, as well as service providers. I'll go to the next slide. So the slide highlights here the criteria of how, in regards to grant eligible activities, there are multiple activities listed here that the grant can cover. And this includes all these things listed here, whether it's staff time, food preparation and storage, construction and permitting costs, and even job training, amongst others. And this slide highlights here the scoring criteria of how applications will be scored. So note that there are also 4 categories listed here that you should be considering when applying for the application. And as you can see here from this slide, this is the current site plan that the COG and Baldwin Park have been working on with one of our homeless shelters. Essentially, this slide is helpful as a visual reference of what the future kitchen space will look like at one of these sites. And with this slide here, here's a short list of what equipment we're looking to install. And these equipment will be helpful for collecting, preparing, and also storing different types of food for our homeless building sites. And this concludes my part of the presentation, and I'll turn it over to Manny to go over the last 4 slides. Manny, go ahead, and I can help navigate.
Thank you, Nicholas. In regards to, next slide, thank you, potential benefits for Baldwin Park, Esperanza Villa, and Serenity Homes, in terms of taking a holistic approach to treating the family, there is an opportunity in regards to a increased job opportunities for tiny home residents. All those 25 individuals are adults. A commercial kitchen could allow for food service training and certification for tiny home residents. So please keep in mind that is a growing industry in terms of food preparation. Similar programs include County of Los Angeles Nutrition and Physical Activity Program and San Francisco. Both programs are considered cutting edge in regards to increased compliance with SB 1383, the City of Baldwin Park is working with the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments to identify food recovery opportunities to comply with SB 1383. Serenity Homes' existing unused structure with a kitchen could be utilized as a mini hub for food recovery. And this program specifically would assist with the food preparation for Serenity Homes and Esperanza Villa. Next slide, please. And potential benefits for Baldwin Park for both sites, Esperanza Villa and Serenity Homes. Reduction of ongoing operational costs related to food service. Food delivery at Esperanza Villa is $15 per person per day, equating to $136,875. It's approximately 17% of the total budget. Food delivery at Serenity Homes is slightly more, it's $180,000. Combined with the budget for food at Esperanza Villa and Serenity Homes, we are anticipated to expend a total of $316,875 in ongoing operational funding required for meals. Potential savings can enable the programs to run longer and reduce the funding required to bridge the gaps between county and LASHA funding. A commercial kitchen would enable the Serenity Home site to accept food donations to reduce the per meal cost to provide meal service to residents, which would result in an overall savings in regards to the food budget. Once capacity at Serenity Homes is reached, the site would potentially provide meals to Esperanza Villa and support reduced meal costs at both sites. So at this point, direction requested from the City Council, authorize the Recreation Community Service Director to apply for a San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments Food Insecurity Grant funding and develop a commercial kitchen at Serenity Homes if awarded. So once again, this is an application and we will be applying for the funding cycle. In addition, authorize the city to partner with the San Gabriel Valley Council of Government as a co-applicant for the Strategic Growth Council Regional Climate Collaborative, which is also known as RCC grant. The grant would support capacity building for sustainable housing initiatives, including tiny homes, food recovery. So just to recap, next steps: submit food insecurity grant application to San Gabriel Valley Council of Government, refine budget and scope for commercial kitchen at Serenity Homes, work with food waste generators to determine donation capacity, submit partner letter to RCC. And almost at the end, at this point, I'd like to also receive direction from City Council. IKEA donated $30,000 of beds, bedding, dressers, area rugs, storage, etc., valued at approximately $30,000. We are seeking council direction on naming the Serenity Homes Community Room the IKEA Community Room in recognition of their generous donation. If it's the City Council's will, staff will bring back a staff report to memorialize this recognition. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the report and so forth. It sounds like a great opportunity, especially on the job training part. My only concern would be on the IKEA donation. My thing would be is to thank them. What's the IKEA community room? What is exactly that aspect?
It is basically a lounge area, a TV room, and an area where they could eat some meals. Sound about right, Sam? Okay, yes.
Okay.
A homework area and just a common space for the families.
Perfect. Okay. I'm fine with that. You know, again, just looking at our city naming policy, I want to make sure that we're following that process. So if we can go through that, that'd be fine. And if we need to modify our naming city policy to adopt this IKEA community room, I'm certainly open to doing so at our next meeting when that's brought to us at the same time. Because again, we have a city policy. So I just want to make sure we're consistent with that practice.
Yes, those are great comments. We would also like to honor the naming policy, so we just wanted to check in with the city council and maybe include some comments in council comments for the opening on Saturday that the council is considering after a formal vote to name the room after IKEA. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine with me as well. I think that's great. And I think it's really neat that IKEA really stepped up and helped us furnish the whole project, which I think is kind of a pretty big deal. I don't know if any other council members have any questions, comments?
Just a short comment. Thank you, Manny, for that presentation. I think it's a great idea that we do provide the community kitchen since we already have the facility and it would be cost saving to us. The grant would definitely be welcome if we happen to get that. I was at the site today and got to see IKEA's donation. I was very surprised of all the items that they donated and how beautiful the homes are coming along. So yes, let's follow the process for naming and let's move forward with that.
Great. Oh, yes, go ahead, Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Manny, can I just ask, can you just provide us at the next meeting, just for receive and file, a report of how many folks have gone through our tiny homes and where we stand on that with the folks that we've assisted with that? A quick note and file report. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it looks like we are all in agreement to go ahead and move forward with the application and start the consideration process for the naming.
Thank you.
If that is all, then I believe we will move on to our next presentation. And that is Safekeeping Procedures for the Homeless Community, presented by Chief Lopez and Detective Wenner.
Good evening. Oops.
Sir.
Good evening, council members and department directors. So my name is Detective Wenner, and I've been asked to come here to kind of provide a little bit of education for our council members as well as city staff as well as the community. So we've put together this presentation in the interest of transparency and what some of our challenges are for the police department specifically regarding our homeless issue within the city. With that said, we have made great strides. I've been involved with the homeless in Baldwin Park probably for the last 8 to 9 years. I'm very familiar with all of them. And within the last 2 years, we've made some great strides towards resolving the issue. But one of the words that you'll hear me use a lot tonight is balance. We've made great strides with the tiny homes. We've made great strides with the outreach. So with that said, we want to try to find a balance as a police department as well for addressing the individuals who may not want the help or are refusing to get the help. But there are some challenges with that. So I have a handout because some of my transitions on my presentation may be a little bit off. So if I lose you, I don't want to do death by PowerPoint. So if you guys have any questions during the process, please stop me and ask, and I'll be happy to clarify anything. Next slide. So before I kind of get into some of the challenges, I wanted to talk about the different spectrums and different types of homelessness. So, and this is going to be per HUD. So the first is going to be transitional imminent risk homeless. It's going to be the state of homelessness that's a result of a major life change or catastrophic event, resulting in people being unhoused for less than a year. It includes individuals and families who will imminently lose their housing, including housing they own or rent. Usually when they experience transitional homelessness, they may enter some type of transitional housing program for a limited time. They may also sleep in their cars or outside. But oftentimes people experiencing transitional homeless still have jobs, but cannot afford the housing or other expenses. In meeting with Eureka from Community Services and working kind of with some of our resources, I believe that this is primarily the group that our Community Services Department has done such a great job thus far in assisting and providing resources for. The second tier is going to be our hidden homeless, which sometimes we kind of forget. These are individuals who live with others temporarily without a permanent home, otherwise known as kind of couch surfing. They lack access to housing support resources and cannot be identified, and they're often hidden from the statistics that we gather during the Great Count and all the other things that we do to kind of try to keep a track of what the population is. Next slide. The third and one that we probably address the most as a police department is the literal or chronically homeless. These are individuals or families who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence that is a public or private place not meant for human habitation. These are individuals who have been chronically homeless for more than a year, common to have a certain disability, mental health condition, addiction, or other debilitating condition that restrict their ability to address their own homelessness. So whether it's causing them to refuse services or it's causing them to remain homeless, it's usually one of those factors that factors in. It is, again, it's very common for them to refuse services or they deny any outreach assistance. Police calls are generated due to associated encampments or individuals causing disturbance at all hours and on all days. Next slide. So some of the statistics, which you kind of already know, 2019, our county count was 49,521. Next slide. You can go ahead and go through all the numbers. So in 2021, there was no count due to the pandemic. And in 2022, our homeless in LA County rose to 69,144. So it's an increase of 4.1% since 2020. So how does that relate to our city specifically? Next slide. So our count in 2016 was 113, 2017, 143, 2018, 288, 2019, 263, and 2020, 556. I personally have been involved with all of those counts. 2022, we've seen the decrease down to 275, but the significant point is how does that affect our city? How do we compare to other cities in our area? And if you see, Irwindale's at 213, West Covina's at 112, Azusa's at 220, and Almani's at 230. So we're still leading this area for the amount of populated homeless within our city. And that's per LASA. So how does this affect the police department?
I'm sorry, just 1 second. Can we go back to the slide before, if that's okay?
Yes, sir.
I just want to point out the 2020 number, the 556. That number, not only my belief, but also the belief of our staff. We try to work with LASA to make them aware that they had some possible miscounting. And unfortunately, even with staff's effort and the relationship that we have with them, we're not able to be successful in that sense. We had several tracks during the homeless count that particular evening. Not saying that it was malicious, more than anything else, so I think it was more of an error, in which we had several census tracts, two primarily, I think it was three at max, that had an abundant number of homeless individuals being counted. And unfortunately, when we went the next day or that same night, that was not, we couldn't confirm that. And so what we did moving forward for our last count, with the work of our staff, with Sam and others, we actually did our own in-house tracking system to make sure that we wouldn't have the same duplicate issue when the next time account. So the number, as you're talking about for 2022, I honestly believe it's probably closer to 300, because again, we're not counting everyone. But I would say that's more in line with what we have in this year, and also even in 2020, and then also in possibly 2021.
Yeah, yes, I agree. It's definitely more consistent with the rise, not only within our county, but the consistency and rise throughout the years. Because 556 is a big jump, but again, that was kind of the official count.
Right.
And
I understand that was their count.
right. No, I agree. But I guess my takeaway from this is that we obviously, for this area, we're still the most. Right.
Thank you.
No worries. Next slide, please. So looking at how this affects our department as a whole, in 2021, our 4-month average for May, June, July, and August in 2021 was 64 calls for service. And that was regarding any citizen who reported a call that involved a transient or homeless. It was a keyword hit. So anytime a citizen would call in and report something and use the word transient or homeless to describe the individual, we averaged about 64 calls per service within a 4-month period. That didn't include any fire assists or self-initiated stops that our officers may do. This is strictly citizens calling in and what their perception of the individual was. Next slide. So now our 4-month average: May 134, June 128, July 140, August 171. So now our 4-month average for this year is at 143. Again, a significant rise. And again, it doesn't include any self-initiated calls for service, which basically is when an officer is driving down the street, sees some type of violation being made, stops them, and that individual ends up being a transient or homeless. It doesn't include that. This is strictly what a public's perception and their call for service is. Next slide. So beginning August 24th, we designated an actual call code for service where the call is entered in as a transient causing a disturbance. So since August 24th, this past August 24th, less than a month, we've received 114 calls for service regarding a transient causing a disturbance. So we're doing better at keeping track of the calls, doing better at being able to keep the statistics on it by creating these call type codes. Next slide. So I wanted to kind of go over some of the causes of our transiency population specific to our city. So the first is going to be our local hospital and emergency rooms. And pretty much when a homeless individual is taken for any type of treatment or placed on a mental evaluation hold, they're brought to either our local emergency room within the city or an emergency room within the surrounding cities. And this is usually done by outside jurisdictions as well, surrounding cities, because we go to the first hospital that's available. Normally, what I've found in my experience in speaking with individuals who are homeless and where they've came from, a lot of them have just been released from the hospital. So when you're done getting treated, basically what's happening is they're being released into our city, whether they're local or whether they were brought in from another city. So that's one of the causes. Second is MetroLink. Again, speaking with individuals who I've contacted during my time on the street, a lot of individuals come in the MetroLink, as everyone knows, it runs from San Bernardino all the way down to downtown LA. So often the MetroLink, they're not checking for tickets, so they'll get on, and then whenever they see the conductor coming to collect tickets, they'll get off in whatever city they're getting off in. That's where they get off. So that's been a little bit of a problem. Also, San Gabriel, Riverbed, and Santa Fe Dam. I'll have some slides in just a moment, kind of showing what the issue is down there and why that's kind of affecting us. So, as everyone knows, the Riverbed runs quite a few miles. So it's almost used as a throwaway for individuals who are staying near the Santa Fe Dam or south of Valley. There's a pretty large encampment. Next, also, this may be a little bit resolved at the time. Grand Park Inn was currently housing homeless individuals from Los Angeles through the HOPIX program, which they no longer are doing. However, they still are subscribing to the Veterans of America, and I believe they're shopping around for another nonprofit that they can house homeless individuals in. These are not individuals who are local or exclusive to Baldwin Park. These are individuals who are being brought in by the nonprofit from other areas. And then we also have Exodus Transitional Housing, or formerly the Motel 6, which one of the other things that I'm kind of aware of is that they're going through the process of remodeling. So right now they're in the process of relocating all their residents from that hotel. And then also there's challenges with our enforcement due to our staffing, budget, resource coordination, and LADA, that's Los Angeles District Attorney filing, their filing policy, their current filing policies, which now we'll kind of get into the specifics of each. Next slide, please. So normally, California penal codes that are available to us are the following. So 647E is going to be an illegal encampment, temporary shelter, tent, 647F, public intoxication, 647C, Charles, is obstructing or blocking a sidewalk or street. 415 is disturbing the peace. Or another one that's also commonly found is 11377, 11364, that's possession of a controlled substance or paraphernalia. I think there's one more if you move forward, please. Also, the biggest one is the 602, which is trespass. So normally these penal codes are in place for us to use for any type of enforcement. And when I'm saying enforcement, these are individuals who may be refusing to leave, blocking a sidewalk. It doesn't give us the opportunity to clean up an encampment that's visible to everyone. However, next slide. There has since been a Ninth Circuit court decision, Martin versus Boise. So basically it's a ruling, the Ninth Circuit ruled that it's unconstitutional for the city to prosecute homeless people for camping in public when they had nowhere else to go. So what that means for us is if we don't provide shelter beds or housing such as tiny homes or Esperanza Village, and have beds available for them, we can enforce any type of illegal camping codes or blocking sidewalk codes, anything that relates to them residing in a public area. So in addition to that, Los Angeles County District Attorney Special Directive 2007. So this is basically a special directive given by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office regarding homelessness, and it reads, minimize charging misdemeanors and shall not charge loitering, trespassing, prostitution, or other misdemeanors associated with poverty, mental illness, or homelessness. So in addition to that, any fines issued for violations are to be waived for people experiencing homelessness. So basically, if they're given a citation or they're held accountable to show up for any type of violation, they're not even getting any type of fine. So BPMCs is Baldwin Park Municipal Codes. Yes, they are present to use in addition to the penal codes. However, right now, we don't have a city attorney in place to prosecute those, which we would also need the district attorney's approval on, as well as kind of make sure that they're in line with all of the case law that's associated with homelessness, and it's changing very rapidly every day. Next slide. So some other issues that we face, individuals often possess some form of medical condition that requires a medical clearance to be completed prior to booking. So what that means is every time we arrest an individual if we're enforcing and we arrest an individual, it's going to take the officer anywhere between 1 to 8 hours to take them to the hospital, get them medically cleared. What that means for police is that it diminishes our staffing while that officer is with that individual getting them cleared. Also, we respond all hours of the day, including evenings and weekends, when normally public works, for any type of encampment cleanup, our newly acquired Lacata, to provide any outreach assistance, community enhancement, or any private property abatement, or if needed, community services, may not or are not open and available to us. So a lot of times, basically what that means is when we go out, it's after business hours or on weekends, and we're unable to address any type of issues regarding encampments or any violations. Also, right now, there's no storage designated for any of the property of value within an encampment or a carrier containing any property. And when I say carrier, we're talking about strollers, shopping carts, or wagons that's used to store the individual's property, as well as there's no person assigned right now to release the property back to the individual. So looking at something like the city of Pomona and the lawsuit that they faced, a lot of it was due to discarding a lot of the property from homeless individuals, and it opened up the city, to a little bit of liability. So right now we don't have that in place. Next slide. So I just wanted to kind of show you how this plays out with us. So this is a real life example. This is a case study, and I'm going to refer to him as Subject X, who is frequenting the area of Morgan Park as well as Bank of the West right across the street. We received approximately 34 calls for service within the last year to this specific individual at the Bank of the West only. Each of these calls at this location took approximately 30 minutes for the officers, which equaled about 1,020 minutes or over 17 hours of time. So that's inclusive of us either contacting the individual and advising him or citing him, as well as possibly having to check the area if he did leave. Also response time, and also contacting the reporting party to get the information from them. So we've also received numerous calls for service at Morgan Park. However, we were unable to kind of narrow that down because we received several calls in Morgan Park regarding transients. But this specific individual frequented Bank of the West and Morgan Park. So within the last 5 months, the subject was arrested 4 times at Morgan Park, twice for public intoxication and twice for indecent exposure. What was the result? Next slide. When the cases were submitted to the District Attorney's Office for filing, per the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, and this is what we received verbatim, the charges are declined in the interest of justice pursuant to LADA Special Directive 2007, which is what we just read. So as a result, subject was released without penalty, fine, or even directed or required treatment. So what that means is normally some courts will issue somebody experiencing homelessness or mental health conditions to receive treatment and in lieu of punishment or fines. So, but none of the above was given to this individual. Next slide. So now I'd like to kind of go over some of the types of encampments and some of the challenges that are presented with each of the encampments, okay? This is not something, I'm not quite sure if anyone is familiar with this. I know the mayor and Councilwoman Avila have taken the time to ride with us and kind of get a feel of what the encampments are doing right now. But this is currently one to the rear of the 1400 block of Virginia Avenue. So this, on the left side, you'll see the 10 freeway, and on the right side will be the rear of the businesses, 1400 block of Virginia Avenue. Next slide. So this is basically considered on public property. This encampment here is one that's located near the intersection of Dalewood Avenue and Puente Avenue, kind of on the side of Jack in a Box and along Puente Avenue. Next slide. So some of the challenges that present themselves with these type of encampments, they're often located on multiple jurisdictions. For example, Caltrans or CHP, there's Metrolink. Encampments are also located on Edison's property and then also on county property. So Caltrans will normally use CHP. Metrolink, I believe they use Los Angeles Sheriff's Department for their enforcement, and Edison has their own security team to provide outreach. All have their own protocols regarding outreach and requirements and the time frame for cleanup. So even though it's located in our city, possibly visible to our public, if it's not in our area, our service area, which we'll kind of go over in a minute as well, we're waiting on one of these entities to follow their own protocols and to get it done within their scheduled time. And a lot of these encampments are primarily only accessible by foot. The last one that we saw to the rear of Virginia, you have to access it by going through the Metrolink tunnel on foot, which is out of public view. It can present an issue of officer safety due to the accessibility. But as also a note, this is the encampment that's primarily responsible for our loitering transients in the area of Food for Less and Target, which kind of shows that when we don't address the encampments, it becomes a quality of life issue that we want to address. Next slide. So this was a good thing to add. It was requested that we add what were our prior protocols for encampment abatement. So basically it was simple. We would respond out to an encampment on public property only, and city yard would respond for immediate cleanup and disposal of items. If it was initiated by the city yard, they would post a 3-day notice, letting them know that the items are going to be discarded. And any salvageable items that weren't infested, soiled, and did not present a health risk were stored in a gated lot at the intersection of Walnut and Olive Street. Problem with that was the lot continued to getting burglarized, and the chain link fence was cut. Items being stored there was taken by, whether it was the same transient or another transient, we don't know, but it didn't solve the problem. And just as a note as well, the encampment has to be located on city maintained property. Again, there's Edison, there's county, there's Metrolink, and there's also Caltrans areas as well. So if it's on any of those areas, we won't respond out. And in addition to that, finally, there was no notification made to community service for any type of outreach. This is where we were years ago. We've progressed to the next slide, please. What our current protocols are, we will respond out to or report an encampment on public property. City Yard then cannot respond for immediate cleanup. What they have to do is they have to notify community services for outreach to begin. So I believe our established time frame, which we've just recently established, is going to be 14 days. So what that means is we have to wait for outreach to begin to post our sign for 14 days. So our 14 days cannot start until that outreach is done. Outreach is done, the sign gets posted, and then we have 14 days from there to schedule a cleanup. Any salvageable items that aren't infested, soiled, and don't present a health risk are going to be, they're currently stored in dumpster containers at the city maintenance yard. Again, with nobody really there to assign to release them or inventory them. Next slide. Now, the next type of encampment is what I believe to be the majority of our issues, or the majority of our encampments, or those are encampments on private property. This particular one was located in the area of Baldwin Park Boulevard and Francisquito Avenue to the rear of a dental office and Yum Yum Donuts. Next slide. This is the other one that's also next to Yum Yum Donuts, next to 31 Flavors. There's actually an encampment in there. Next slide. So some of the challenges, they present different challenges when they're on private property versus public property. So first of all, we can't enforce on private property. However, it requires a private property person's arrest form for us to make any type of arrest for trespassing. Often the owners are not willing to sign or even allow the transients to stay on the property. So, and I have dairy in parentheses there. The reason why I have that there is because, as an example, we have a dairy within our city who was utilizing some of the homeless population to provide, for lack of a better word, security, overnight security at his dairy. So what that turned into was the individual who he allowed there was allowing others to stay there, and as a result, a huge encampment grew to the rear of the dairy. Often the owners and property managers are not local, or they don't reside at the location, and the owner and property managers are uninformed regarding encampment cleanup. So when I'm saying uninformed, as an example, we have a little bit of an encampment to the rear. We have an encampment to the rear of the 99-cent store in El Super. That property manager did perform a cleanup. However, what happened was it was a little bit ineffective, as the person that they hired to do the cleanup dumped the encampment in trash bins at the same location. So homeless left for about an hour while the cleanup occurred. Homeless came back after everybody left, pulled their stuff out of the trash cans, and now their encampment continues to exist. So, and finally, there's a process for community enhancement to address encampment is often at length and different from the process required by law enforcement. So what that pretty much means is that community enhancement has their own way of dealing with property managers and property owners who aren't addressing it. However, the time frame on that can sometimes be extensive. And the more extensive it is, the more opportunity the encampment has to grow, and the cleanup for the encampment becomes more severe. Next slide, please. So, using a model that works, this is currently the Walnut Creek wash beneath the Cloverleaf Bridge. Okay, so this is a case exemplar I wanted to give everyone. This is going to be the San Gabriel Riverbed project that we recently had an opportunity to work in. Next slide. I'll just show some pictures here. This is going to be beneath the 10 freeway within the riverbed, just one tunnel. And I believe there's going to be a total of, I believe, 6 or 7 tunnels that run the length of the riverbed beneath the 10 freeway. This is one. Next slide. This is also beneath this is going to be beneath the 605 freeway in the Walnut Creek Wash. Next slide. This is also on the other side of the 10 freeway, looking on it'd be on the north side of the 10 freeway, looking into the tunnel. Just a little bit of history with this particular encampment. There's 3 generations of family members that live just within this encampment, one family. I've known them for quite some time, and they've went from place to place, but this is kind of where they've settled now. And it consists of 3 generations of families. Next slide. It's another under one of the other tunnels beneath the 10 freeway. So that individual is digging additional tunnels. As you can see, it's pretty deep. Next slide. So in addition to people being down there, there was also some vehicles, abandoned vehicles, burned vehicles, stripped vehicles, motorcycles, etc. Next slide. So going over the case, in August, Baldwin Park Police, we partnered with Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, their homeless outreach team and enforcement team, to address the ongoing problem within the San Gabriel Riverbed, beneath the 10 freeway and beneath the Cloverleaf Bridge, future site of our bike path. We successfully cleaned the encampments underneath the Interstate 10 freeway and along the Walnut Creek Wash within 2 weeks. During the 2 weeks, approximately 25 to 30 individuals were contacted in the encampments, 2 of which immediately accepted housing services and were taken to shelters, and 2 of which accepted immediate mental health services and were taken voluntarily to treatment centers. In addition to that, we recovered and removed 5 stolen vehicles and an additional abandoned vehicle. All encampments were successfully abated within 2 weeks. Next slide. That's the result. Next slide. So why was it successful? There was a dedicated team consisting of law enforcement, outreach, which was LASA for this project, which was LASA, mental health services, which was LA County Department of Mental Health, and LA County Public Works. All of the entities were at the location at the same time, alleviating any miscommunication, time lapse due to coordination efforts, or time for each individual entity to respond. All entities were working towards an established and specific goal rather than duplicating efforts. So going back to what I was saying about the encampments and outreach, and we're not able to post until the first day of outreach is made. A lot of times that outreach is made several days later, if not weeks later. With this, outreach was done that same day that City Works was with us. Outreach was made the same day that the Sheriff's Department was with us, that we were there, and we were able to post as soon as the first day that we went there. The team had an established time frame, which was 14 days in which to provide outreach, post signage, and to schedule any special needs, whether we needed a hazmat team, call out Caltrans, and in the interest of minimizing the risk of any liability. The team had the necessary equipment, such as off-road vehicles, to efficiently navigate the riverbed terrain, bike paths and riverbed slopes, as well as tractor loaders and refuse bins. The team was committed to enforcement and confident to effect an arrest if needed should any individuals refuse to leave. However, I will tell you one of the other successful parts of this was that when you perform outreach the way that we did and communicate the way that we did over the 2-week period, there's very few people who will argue with you. A lot of the individuals down there admittedly were like, yes, I procrastinated. Yes, I waited. Yes, I didn't want the services. So now I understand that it's time to go. So we didn't have to arrest anybody, but we were able to move everybody out successfully to the riverbed while still providing them services. And then obviously understanding that the issue will recur if regular enforcement is not consistent. And this is one of the things that we're trying to improve on. Next slide. So some challenges versus solutions, Martin versus Boise, we kind of went over that. We need to provide shelter beds, or they need to be provided or designated in order for us to enforce any type of homeless related laws. The ability for enforcement, obviously staffing, PD staffing, time, resources, funding, vehicles that are needed for riverbed and or the bike paths. Because right now, it's not effective for us to use our normal patrol vehicles to navigate the terrain in those areas, and some of the out of sight areas, such as the one along the Metrolink. Encampment cleanup, we need more access to city yard and storage hours that are after hours, because we deal with a lot of these individuals and we deal with a lot of encampments either after hours or on the weekends. and limitation of host funds. So one of the questions that we always get is, well, why don't we just use the host funds, which is the the outreach services team funds provided by the county? Well, unfortunately, those host funds can only be used for outreach. So if there's an individual that we need to address by utilizing enforcement, we cannot use those funds to do that. So as a solution, request that our city grant writer locate grants related to homelessness, and I have in parentheses Anaheim PD. Anaheim PD currently has a homeless team consisting of 2 officers and a sergeant that are solely funded by a grant. That was it for 2 years. No additional funds are needed. It's not the staffing budget is not needed. It's solely a grant that their grant writer had located for them. So, and also to possibly create a homeless encampment response and outreach team, or what I like to refer to as HERO, to respond to encampments causing quality of life issues for our residents. So again, we're doing a great job with the outreach that we're doing, but we just need to do a little bit of a better job finding some balance. Next slide, please. We kind of addressed this, the storage of property and personal belongings. I know that we've visited this years prior regarding the purchase of a storage facility. At that time, it was a storage container or some type of secure designated area. One of the other solutions that in my research I found was effective for other cities was that they provided storage vouchers. Why this is important is because a lot of times individuals who are homeless will refuse services or not take advantage of services because they're scared to leave their belongings behind. Okay, they don't want to lose them. They don't want them to be stolen. So a model that kind of worked for some other cities was to provide them with storage vouchers where they can store their items, given the caveat that they are continuing and receiving services. Once those services are not being given any longer, they lose the right to the storage facility and they're unable to store their items there. Enforcement of laws, we went over the municipal codes. We have the municipal codes in place. However, a city attorney would be needed again to prosecute them and to ensure that they align with some of the homeless related case law that's out right now. But also to assess locations for abatement, for the abatement process, some of those shopping centers and private property shopping centers that aren't being addressed by the owners and management. Pursue restraining orders against protecting the city from any habitual subjects that are creating disturbances or property damage. Our public works has suffered a great loss, as I personally have taken the reports for an individual who's breaking sprinklers along Pointe Avenue for quite some time. That was a lot of money for the city, and it's something that if we had someone placed to possibly pursue a restraining order, the subject had no ties to Baldwin Park at all whatsoever, but resided in this area as transient. Also established the zero tolerance area, which is currently in progress. Mr. Saldivar has directed us to kind of begin that process, which we have, as well as signage at parks and off ramps. So some of our parks lack some of the signage advising them of the municipal codes that are in place regarding being in the park after 10 or using the park as intended. And then also last, addressing the public perception and business needs. Posting visible signs at encampments showing the problem areas are being addressed. We recently worked together on an encampment, pretty large encampment on Ramona Boulevard, just east of Pointe Avenue. While City Yard did post signs, I believe that it would help if the signs were somewhat modified to let the community know that are passing by and seeing the encampment that outreach is being provided and the encampment is being addressed, so they know what's going on. When we were actually cleaning the encampment, we were thanked by a lot of the residents, a lot of the business owners who were passing by for addressing the problem. And then also providing education and any consultation services to businesses or property management regarding preventative measures. One of the code enforcement was involved with the dairy I had referred to earlier, but I was also requested to go out and speak with the owner, which I did. We walked the premise and we looked at ways on how we can improve, which was adding a gate for nighttime hours, adding lighting, and adding cameras, all of which he followed. So those are things that we can do to kind of provide education for our businesses and our residents. Next slide. So the challenge is limitation of outreach services available to PD. We just started Lakata. I've worked with Joshua pretty closely over the last couple weeks. But however, there are 3 days a week, 9 to 6, which is currently being paid for by the San Gabriel Valley COG. So expanding on those or supplementing the current services would help with the outreach services available to us. And then also I added CityNet because that was another entity that that's available to do that as well. Next slide. And that concludes it. I'd like to open it up for any questions if anybody has anything.
Mr. Mayor, could I comment just for a minute on the enforcement of laws issue that the detective brought up? So the detective is correct that we have some issues as it relates to enforcement of the Baldwin Park Municipal Code. We do have a city prosecutor. That's the law firm Jones and Mayer. And usually it would be a city prosecutor that would enforce these, not the city attorney's office. But the outside law firm, Jones and Mayer, they're currently only doing enforcement as it relates to code enforcement. In fact, we have a current case involving a sign related to the car wash across the street that our city prosecutor is doing. And that is an ongoing case with our city prosecutor. They're not doing the criminal trespassing because, as the detective mentioned, the DA really doesn't want us to prosecute criminal homeless crimes, and we would have to get the DA's permission to do that if we were to ask Jones and Mayer, our city prosecutor, to do it. In addition, while I probably would not volunteer to do this, I was a city prosecutor in the city of Long Beach for a year, an assistant city prosecutor, and prosecuted assaults and robberies and other crimes. So the city attorney's office could do it, but I would, if we wanted to enforce, as the detective is talking about, which I certainly would agree to, we would probably want Jones and Mayer, our current city prosecutor, to do it. And we would have to reach out to the DA's office to get their permission and agreement to allow our current city prosecutor to be able to start enforcing those kinds of criminal statutes related to homelessness.
And again, you know, my primary reason for addressing that is so often there's a misconception that we can just tell them to move along, and they move along. There's a misconception that we can just arrest them and just throw them in jail and then they're made to get treatment. It's just not where we're at right now. And there's other steps that we can take. Of course, it took someone to tell me, you know, we can't arrest our way out of the problem. And especially now with the limitations and challenges that we have. So part of the reason why I'm up here is to provide that education so people know what our challenges are, not only as a police department, but as a city and as a community.
Great. Any questions from council?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for that report. It was very thorough. Those pictures that you showed us are actually encampments that I've seen, probably the mayor as well. It is a very difficult situation. I've seen the way you've dealt with the homeless. You have a very good way of approaching and respecting them, and I see how much they respect you as well. And I think that's very important. The way our officers approach the homeless has a lot to do with how they will respond, and training for our officers is definitely important. So to know how to address it, because if they have mental illness or what have you, they need to be approached in a different way so that the officers are safe and they know what they're dealing with. This is a difficult situation, not just for the city, but for the whole country at this time. Everybody's facing a lot of homelessness. And it is important that we pay attention to all the laws that are in place to protect them, and everything that we need to do in order for it to be successful. We need to follow the law, and we need to make sure that we have a place for them when we're moving them, or like you did that cleanup. How long did it take, by the way, to do that cleanup under the bridges? You said 2 weeks, but to get that team together, how long did that take?
That was actually pretty quick.
The team.
That was, yeah, that was, the team was already put together by Los Angeles County Sheriffs. I was invited to participate, which at the direction of my chief, I accepted, so we can kind of see why they've been so successful with their encampment cleanups, and especially one as large as that, and especially knowing that our council has an interest in get cleaned up in preparation for the bike path.
I know the last time I went on one of those outreach, there was already notifications that were given to the people living under the bridge.
Right.
They were given notice. But you did say we need to have regular enforcement so that it doesn't get to that point. And by regular enforcement, what do you mean exactly?
So at least having a dedicated officer who can address, like I had said as well, a lot of times when we're dealing with homeless individuals, there's other things that go into it, such as medical clearances and whatnot. It's just something out of a lot of our patrol officers right now don't have the time to do because of our calls for service. So at the least, the resources available to us for that officer who could be dedicated to addressing the homeless issues, but giving them the resources as well as creating that position for an officer to be able to primarily focus on that and coordinate efforts for that. It doesn't necessarily need to be done by that officer, but at least for that officer to be dedicated to addressing those issues.
Okay, and then Robert mentioned that Jones and Meyer is the city prosecutor, and if we had him start to work these cases, for example, the gentleman that was breaking all the sprinklers, it's probably a question for you, Robert. What would first we need the DA's approval for him to do that. And what would be the next steps to prosecute individuals like that are constantly doing things like this gentleman was?
So yes, we'd get the district attorney's approval to prosecute those kinds of homelessness crimes. Then after a police report or incident report was made, it would be presented to the city prosecutor, and he or she would decide, and they're independent. I mean, they're independent of us. They have to make their own legal determination about whether or not they're going to prosecute the case or not, just like a district attorney would. Unlike the district attorney that does not want to enforce these kinds of crimes, our city prosecutor would enforce these kinds of crimes if he determined that there was a crime that was committed.
But you say the DA has to approve of him doing this.
Yes.
And what are the steps for that?
Well, we need to reach out to the district attorney with a letter identifying who our city prosecutor is, identifying the qualifications. Our city prosecutor, Jones and Mayer, is city prosecutor for many of the surrounding cities. I believe West Covina and some of the other ones. So I don't think we would have any trouble getting the city prosecutor approved. I think the only potential issue would be whether or not they would approve us charging homelessness crimes, because as you saw, city prosecutor would enforce municipal code. When the police go out and they can cite these penal codes, trespassing, all these other things, if they submit it to the district attorney, they're the ones that enforce those kinds of codes. Mm-hmm. But they don't enforce those kinds of codes as it relates to homelessness. So this, in a way, is going around them, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of asking the district attorney to enforce penal code, we're going to be asking a city prosecutor to enforce municipal code. And it may be that the district attorney will not want us to be doing that as it relates to our municipal code. And so there may be some pushback as it relates to that. That's the only potential issue that I see.
But if we have individuals vandalizing and destroying property, there's constant reports of the same person doing the same thing. Wouldn't that be already a red flag for the DA? Or is he still not prosecuting those?
Well, the DA has some very, shall I say, unusual policies. I think, the police are probably well aware of that. And a lot of unpopular policies of not enforcing laws related to exactly what you're talking about. And then you have this recidivism where you get these people just coming back and doing the same thing and doing the same thing. I would hope that the kinds of acts that you're talking about would militate in favor of the district attorney allowing us to do that, since we're doing it on our own dime and we're doing it enforcing our own municipal codes, and it would not reflect upon the district attorney's office. So if they have this policy that they don't want to do that, okay, great. but they should allow us to be able to enforce our own codes. So I'm just telling you what what I'm thinking in terms of the political landscape of the DA's office. But we certainly could do that and reach out and do everything we can to get that consent from the district attorney's office to allow Jones and Mayer to, in addition to doing the enforcement of the codes and the things, our zoning enforcement, which is what they do now, to allow them to prosecute these other criminal acts as well.
I feel if we already have them on board, we should utilize them to help us with this problem in our city and hopefully find a solution. And maybe once people see that, cross their fingers, that we are able to enforce these, it'll reduce some of the crime and give out a big message to those individuals creating problems in our city.
Right.
And I know the DA is a big issue for all of us. I agree. Not my favorite topic here. But we need to do something as a city. And if we have Jones Meyer already as our prosecutor, let's work with him to see how much more we can do with his help.
The other thing I was going to say, Councilmember Avila, that we can quickly check without expending any money is whether any other city in the San Gabriel Valley or anywhere in LA County, has requested such a waiver from the district attorney. Because if they have granted it to another city, then we can definitely utilize the same pathway.
I agree, Enrique, and I think that we'll look into that and make sure for the next council meeting we'll be able to give you a report on that. Lastly, well, the one I will mention is part of the problem that we have with our city prosecutor is that they will charge the case, they present the case at the West Covina courthouse, and then the person that's charged doesn't show up. Then there's a warrant issued for their arrest. And, that would take police resources to go out and serve those warrants. In this case, with the homeless, it'll be even more problematic because they may not be able to find that homeless person again right away. And in all likelihood, the homeless person is not going to show up to court. So there are these other kinds of obstacles as well, even if the DA allowed the city prosecutor to do it.
However, if we have an individual like the one that was breaking the sprinklers, that person obviously is not 100% there. They're probably going to be clueless and will make themselves visible. And at least if our police comes across them, there's already an arrest warrant for them where you can immediately prosecute, especially if once we have the funds and start putting an enforcement team together, it would just make it easier if there's already a warrant out there.
And I think as an alternative as well, some other cities also have, I believe for lack of a better term, it's like homeless court, where they're, like I said, they're given some type of mandated treatment in lieu of penalties or fines, but we have to get to that point. If we have nothing to prosecute them for, nothing to cite or arrest them for, we can't even start that process.
Right, so that's why we need Jones and Meyer, our city prosecutor, to help start with these processes, to help our department move forward and hopefully see some change little by little.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that presentation. It was amazing. A lot of good information. It is important for all of us to know that a lot of times your hands are tied. And I know because I've seen all of you back there in action too, working with the homeless, and you do the best that you can with what the law allows you to do and with the amount of people that you have working. So thank you for what you do out there. We will continue to address this issue and look for ways to help you address it while you're out there and help the individuals on the street. And I agree, it's not just arrests, but if there's individuals causing problems or harming others, they definitely should not be on the streets. That should not be allowed at any given moment. And if we need the city prosecutor's help, then we need to get on that and start it. That was all my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments?
I mean, Mr. Mayor, unless the Mayor Pro Tem. I think again.
Go ahead, Councilman. I'll go ahead.
No, please, Mayor.
I just had a question. So I want to thank Detective Winter for the presentation. A lot of information to try to try to digest here, but so it seems like in a lot of aspects, our hands are tied to an extent. But he did mention some of the steps that we can take to try to remedy this problem sooner than later. Obviously, the zero tolerance is in the works. How do we start getting this grant writer to start writing or looking for grants to be able to provide the funding to the police department to be able to hire those homeless coordinators? Number one. Number two, the homeless encampment response team and the outreach hero team that you were referring to, would that be also funded through those grants that we would be seeking, or would that be two separate teams, or how would that work?
So basically, what I referred to was kind of, and granted, I know Anaheim is a very different city in population and resources, but there are grants out there. It wasn't a county grant, it wasn't a city, it was a state grant that's accessible to anybody. But unfortunately, that's not my area of expertise. But what I'm hoping for, what I'm working toward, what I've been working towards is at one point creating a response team to encampments. That's what I was referring to. So in Anaheim's case with their grant specifically, yes, the grant solely funded their team consisting of 2 officers and a sergeant.
Perfect, 2 officers and a sergeant.
And we have grant writers, right, Enrique?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
So we need to get on those grant writers and start looking for the grants that we need here.
And I think the biggest difference when I kind of looked into it, and again, I understand it's apples and oranges. However, their advantage in this situation was that their grant writer was specifically used for PD, for their police department, versus I believe ours is used citywide.
Well, let's see what type of expertise they have. If not, we need to find one that's specific to PD and to this type of grants. So they're out there. If they found one, we should be able to find one as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if the grant writers that we currently have within the city are not specialized in PD grants, then maybe we should look or seek out a grant writer specifically for PD, so that we can get this team or this task force up and running, because there's a lot of work for us to do. And I would honestly love to see this move a lot faster, so sooner rather than later, because as you can see, this is a big issue that we're having around the entire community. And I know that with the DA that we have, it's not really helping us much, but we need to figure out ways and solutions for us to be able to do that proper outreach and see if they need or they want to accept the services and put them in those services. And if not, figure out what are we going to do with them? Where can we place them? What can we do to get them off the streets? My biggest concern with some of these chronically ill homeless people is the fact that some of these people are jeopardizing our community's public safety. And that is a big concern. So we need to figure out a way how we're going to, if we have to give direction as a council, or what the next steps are going to be, so that we can start addressing these issues sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Mayor, I want to chime in and just say that where we do have controls, we should consider and use them. And I've mentioned background checks, and I know it hasn't been popular among the, homeless services groups and even this council. But the reason why I've mentioned it time and again is because that's where we have some control. And what is happening is because, I understand having the no barriers, and making it as accessible for our homeless population as possible. And all of that is wonderful. It's great. It's good. But it's like they say, no good deed goes unpunished. And so what's happening right now is we're getting people transported to our community, and they're the chronically homeless individuals that other communities just don't know what to do with. And, then we're experiencing an increase. I've seen individuals out in our community I've never seen. I would be curious to know the incident yesterday with the 38 and the 70-year-old. homeless individuals, how long they've been here in Baldwin Park. And it's not to demonize, it's not to criminalize anyone. It's simply to really be thoughtful about, what we're encouraging in our community and what we're limiting, and using those control levers wherever possible. So I would say that, yes, I mean, there is a need. There will always be a need, especially for our families that are on the verge of homelessness. And we need to be thinking about, how do we prevent them from becoming homeless? Our seniors, the same thing. The cost of living is so high across California. And so, like preventative measures and all of that, is very important, but we really need to be careful about the policies that we're approving and, what we're really encouraging with those policies. So any grants that we go and seek, I would really encourage that, we try to have some controls on some background checks, because what's happening is other communities are seeing that we're pretty much open door. We're open door to, anybody that fits in the community. And that's pretty subjective, if you ask me. But the people are being transported here. They're being dropped off. In addition to the homeless population that was mentioned earlier, where they've been here for a longer period and sometimes even generations, unfortunately. So anyway, I just wanted to say that if we do seek grants or if we allocate funding, let's think about how we can build in the controls, because if we do pursue other sources of funding and it's low barrier, no barrier, we're only encouraging more. Just something to think about. Thank you.
Yeah. So before you answer that, I just have to openly and publicly disagree. So, homelessness is not new to Baldwin Park. And even before tiny homes, we've been seeing more and more homeless people. And you're seeing it through the counts since, 6-8 years ago. So this has nothing to do with the tiny homes. As of now, the tiny homes still have a background check. And I don't know, Detective, but I don't know if you've seen if anybody that's staying at these tiny homes has made any sort of crime or has been involved in any of these issues that you're talking about.
No, we've received minimal calls there, actually. I would like to say, just in closing, just before I go, I get both sides of the discussion. I really do. My mentality now is different than what my mentality was years ago. And our chief helped me kind of grow into that and know that, like I said, there's a place for everything, including tiny homes, including enforcement, including outreach. There's a need for all of it. There's not one answer to this issue. There's so many moving parts. There's so many solutions and that are involved, because there's so many variants of and levels of homelessness. So there's a need for all of it. So we just want to make sure that I think our primary focus up here tonight as a police department is one issue of transparency, obviously, but as well as to provide that education so people know that our efforts are being made to the best of our ability. However, we are presented with challenges just like anybody else. But with that said, again, there's a need for every aspect of it: shelters, tiny homes, community services, police department. There's a need for it, everything.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't agree with the statement regarding this idea that we're welcoming people in here when we're really not. We have a nexus. These people do not get into our services. These are specifically for Baldwin Park residents. And so it's very important that we just kind of stick to what's actually happening. And I really encourage my colleagues to go and check out these projects for themselves. I don't think all of them have been able to have that opportunity, but I do really encourage them to seek out places, talk to the people that work there, talk to the people that live there.
I do personally know that the people that I've referred, we've been directed to ensure that there's a nexus to Baldwin Park. That there's
and I've seen it firsthand. I was out there with you and the sheriffs, and then I was at Esperanza. The majority of the people at Esperanza are 50 to 60 and above. I highly doubt they're the ones committing any sort of crime out here.
And I just want you to know that I have also seen personally what you and your team as a police department is doing in our city, and that job is not easy, especially when there's so many laws in place that impedes for you to do certain things. But I do appreciate everything you guys are doing out there. It's not an easy task going underneath those bridges, talking to individuals, because you don't know, one minute they're okay, another minute maybe they're high, or they just somewhere else that you put your life on the line, you and your team. So know that we appreciate everything that you're doing. And I know all this research that you're doing is definitely going to help us. We want to make sure that the improvements that we make and the strides that we make with our homeless are being done and followed. We are following the law because we don't want to jeopardize a lawsuit or what have you. We also want to respect these individuals. Most importantly, we want to make sure that your team is safe. Your team is safe while they're doing their work. And thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing out there, you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Detective, if you mind? We're not done yet. And bear with me, I have 6 items here.
Sorry.
And one of them I'm going to certainly ask you for some feedback on. The first item is, again, in regards to the notices, and this is essentially direction for staff, is you talked about the partnership with our business community. I think it's very important, I agree with you, that they need to be informed as to what needs to be, how they can help be part of the solution along with what we do to help them. So what I would ask is for the staff, through Ron, I believe, if we can send a letter to all of our business occupancy owners, whoever we have their business tax and so forth, a license, if we can send out a letter with some information with them as to how we can help, how they can help support us. As you mentioned, you provided some fact sheets or just some information. So perhaps we can create a 2-page document or whatever the case may be with the detective, so we can send that out as soon as possible. So that would be one thing for us to do, because again, that's something that we could take action today. And again, working with them, with perhaps either your contact number or somebody, I don't want to add more work to you, but I'll get to that in a second, that could help with that. So that way we have it's a multi-pronged approach to, helping solve this crisis that we see across the country in our region. So that would be item 1. The other thing is, in regards to the district attorney, I agree with Councilmember Avila. Absolutely, we need to engage our current attorney that we have on retainer. But my only suggestion and recommendation around that is to create more of a policy in which it's not for the lower tier offenses, right? Because again, I wholeheartedly agree with you that the city attorney, the DA, will just kick those out. It's not worth their time. That goes against their policy. But I think what we want to do is create our standards in which certain types of multiple incidents that are creating violence, those incidents, such as the individual that's exposing himself at the park and so forth. Those are the folks that we have to assist with. And unfortunately, if we can't assist with them, then we have to create a paper trail for prosecution and so forth. And until we get to that point, as you know, we ain't going to get anywhere with that individual. So that would be my thing, Robert, is if we can create a policy that's more strategic in the sense of what type of cases or the type of individuals that we would be presenting to the courts versus just a blanket policy, because I don't think a blanket policy would address the issues that we're challenged with, but more importantly, the officers and our residents are challenged with, because we all get the texts and calls of individuals exposing themselves not only in the parks but in other locations.
It looks like that we want to focus on multiple offenders, the same person, anything to do with violence, anything with sexual exposure, things of that nature, rather than a simple trespass or something of that nature.
Correct. Just bring back what that would look like with us once you speak with others and see how that looks like, based on also what Enrique mentioned.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The other one, and then in regards to the same attorney, there might be an opportunity to offset some of the costs on that. If we have some multiple jurisdictions next to us, El Monte and whatever else, that they may be able to, want to utilize that attorney for, for saving some of the cost or spreading the cost around. Because I suspect that they also have the similar challenges in their city. So if we can do a regional approach around that, that makes it, to me, it makes more sense. Again, but I think we have to have the first is the type of policy that we want to address, and then we can work with our partners and then be able to approach the DA for their stamp of approval on that.
Well, in terms of the city prosecutor, so let's say we had El Monte, West Covina, and Baldwin Park. If he's working on a case for Baldwin Park, he bills by the hour and he'll charge just to Baldwin. So okay. El Monte's not going to pay for part of that case, and we wouldn't pay for any of their cases. So the model usually works that you're talking about, but in this instance, it would be just billed to us.
Not a problem. I was just looking for economy of scales there for us.
Thank you.
Cost savings. Thank you very much. And then one of the other two items here is I agree with you. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree that you need a dedicated individual. This is why we discussed about it during our budget process, and I firmly believe that you need more money and so forth. As my council members mentioned, that we need to assign, a grant writer. I know a couple people, so Chief, I can share those resources with you. But my gut feeling is on that is we're not going to see any type of money for 8 to 12 months on that. That's just a realistic things because of grant cycles and so forth. So in the interim, what I would suggest for our council is, if we believe in what we're talking about, is to help create a pilot program. So in 2 weeks, if you can provide to us what a cost estimate would be to have a dedicated officer for us to look at funding in the short term through perhaps maybe our general, through our savings, our reserves, because we have over $12 million. And this is something that is well worth pulling money out of our reserves to help offset some dedicated time, whether it's for someone individual full-time or for overtime expenses. But again, my only concern with the overtime is we already have officers, doing their normal beat, and to ask them to come in on a day off or extend their time just puts more burden on the officers themselves. So I don't necessarily see as that being the solution versus more of a dedicated individual. And then in the interim, I would highly recommend also to, reach out to LAPD. I think they have the SMART team. They have an encampment response outreach team that they work with the county, and we can certainly connect you with them because we did some work with them about 3.5 years, and that was a nationwide cutting edge program. And then of course the last part, if I may, is the governor just recently signed the Care Courts Act. Can you just share with us and for the audience of when LA County might be seeing that type of work?
Is that referring to the court program?
Yes, sir.
I know that the city of LA already has it in place. I don't foresee it anytime soon happening with LA County, to be honest with you. I don't. As much as I like, as much as I'd like to see that, but yeah.
Not a problem. I appreciate that. Just as a reference point, I believe LA County will be is supposed to have their court established by 2024.
Okay.
So it's not soon enough. I think they're going with Long Beach and a couple others, San Francisco and a couple other counties first, to figure out the wrinkles and so forth before they fully implement it. But I think unfortunately, it's going to be till 2024.
It's going to be some
If
time.
there's a way of doing that, because again, there are some individuals that just, either the substance is controlling them and they just can't think for themselves because of those challenges. But if there's ways of looking at that, and also looking for our grants for psychiatric assistance, right? The field folks. LA just rolled out a program, or I think they've had a pilot program recently. So that might be something that, we look at as we're looking towards these grant funds and so forth.
Right. And just to kind of piggyback off that, we've already taken a great step in the right direction by obtaining LACATA or LACATA, I believe. Now it's just a matter of supplementing that, which I've already had discussions with Eureka on it and whatnot. So like I said, as of now, I kind of mentioned that they're available to us 3 days a week from like 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening. But and they're great at what they do, but there's a way to supplement that so we have more care available during most hours of the day and more days of the week.
Perfect. Yeah, but with the chief and Rico and Manny, if you could just come back with a report of what that wish list would look like. Not to say you're going to get it, but at least it gives us a framework and also the time frame in which we can implement, a pilot program as we're looking for some of these grant funds that will come in hopefully sometime next year or earlier if possible.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mayor, if I may, as you can see that it's quite extensive, the issues that we're dealing with as a law enforcement agency. And then, the partners here that are sitting next to me, they're also deep involved in the process that we're dealing with on a daily basis. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is the fact that, we are working towards, with Rico and Manny, as far as a crisis response team that's in the works in the next maybe month or so. We're putting that together. So there is things that we're already working on. It's just that I wanted to educate the council as well as our residents as to how much it takes for us to be involved in the process and the amount of time for a patrol officer. Again, we're working our guys constantly, overtime and all those kind of things. So I've already looked at to dedicating an officer to this issue. Again, it's a matter of number of people we have. It's either have to pull somebody from patrol to actually do this for us. It's gonna cost me a little bit, but again, as far as manpower, but I think if I can get on the ground level of doing these things, we'll get a head start on these things. So thank you for your support. But I just wanted to, like I said, it's more than what the public perception is as far as what we can do now. And back in the day, you could ask people to move on, but now if there's requirements by the state, there's requirements by the federal law for us to make sure that we're providing services and those kind of things. I want to be sure that we're proactive in that process, but also making sure that we're taking care of our community as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to go ahead and move to closed session.